part 3 of this 3-part listener Q&A, I dive into the concept of motivation, negative self-talk, recovering from burnout, and perhaps most interestingly, my new meditation practice, how I'm doing it, what I've gained from it, and what you may get out of implementing it into your daily practice. This is a really interesting, candid episode that I hope you get a lot of value from. Without further ado, let's dive in. I'm proud and excited to announce that the new book, Transform Your Body, Transform Your Life, is now available. I've put the links to grab your copy from Amazon worldwide in the show notes, and I can't wait to see what you think. As a thank you for listening to the podcast, email podcast@rntfitness.com with your receipt, and we'll send you the free ebook version to start reading immediately. If you like a sneak peek of what's inside, you can download the first chapter at rntfitness.com/book. Also, you've heard me talking about the power of journaling for a long time, so I'm happy to announce we've now got customized RNT journals in store. There's a mix of prompts and freestyle writing, which you can take a glimpse of on rntfitness.com/journal. Just a quick one before we get into this episode. If you're in the UK and you use supplements, I'd highly recommend checking out Reflex Nutrition, where they're giving up to 40% on all their range if you use the code PTRNT at checkout. I've been using Reflex for nearly a decade, with their microwave being one of my favorite whey proteins. It's grass-fed, hormone-free, and digests so well compared to most on the market. Check out their full supplement range, including all your transformation basics and plant-based alternatives on reflexnutrition.com, and use the code PTRNT at checkout for up to 40% off. So on this third and final part of the solo Q&A, I'm going to be diving into meditation, burnout, and fatigue. More specifically on the latter two, how I've managed to recover from them in the past, as well as what I'm doing to make sure that they stay at the wayside. A lot of interest has been shown on my uptake into meditation, so I'm going to be diving into meditation as well towards the end of this podcast. So to kick it off, first question: How do you recover from burnout and fatigue? I feel I need to keep going at 120 miles an hour and excel in all areas of my life. That's my nature. I want to be the best at everything. That drive for excellence. I feel you have the same work ethic. What's been your experience? Now, as I've spoken about on the renewal and quite a few different podcasts, burnout has always been my Achilles heels for years, and I've struggled so much with burnout, pushing too hard, and then just going even harder. I think in the last installment of the Q&A, maybe in the part 1, where I discussed the suppression element and suppressing emotions to even push even harder, that's been always my driver into burnout. And I think it's the biggest issues high performers face. People that have that desire to go 120 miles an hour and excel in all areas of life, the biggest issues high performers like that face is their own mind. Their own mind. They're working for the worst boss in the world, which is their own mind, and their own mind is running absolute chaos on them and continuously cracking the whip to get them to perform even higher. So it's the biggest issues high performers face, and the few things that have been absolute game changers for me personally with my own sort of recovery with burnout, having faced a lot of it in the past couple of years, is one of them actually is having people around me who are doing incredibly well, but also doing it in an enjoyable and healthy way. That balance is extremely difficult to crack, really hard to crack. And being around those people is really inspiring for me to do the same. I've got a few really good friends who really live and breathe that balance. And balance is always a difficult word to say, to discuss, and a difficult sort of concept to bring to life. But something that I've seen some people really crack well is the ability to drive at 120 miles an hour, but then also know how to sit at 0 miles an hour and be completely content with that, and actually find a lot of joy and enjoy the recovery element of that, knowing that it allows them to go 122, 125, 130, 140 miles an hour later for short stints. And having those people around me and watching them do it, observing them is really It has been really key for me. The second one is no alarms. I've laboured this point now, but acknowledging my own sleep requirements has been an absolute life changer. I've had to go, for example, 120 miles an hour myself for the last couple of weeks due to the wedding, due to recent business changes, and keeping no alarm has kept me going without burnout. I can guarantee that had I stuck to my old schedule of forcing myself to wake up in the early hours, I would have definitely hit the red line a lot earlier. Whereas this time I managed to stay on the right side and be well within it. So continuing to labor that point, but absolute game changer there. Third one is being really on top of my nutrition, activity levels, paying attention to that 10,000 step rule, and also just staying leaner has helped a lot. I've noticed I've got a few. I know what I try and do at each kilogram is notice how I feel, look, and perform. And over the last year, I've really tried to refine where is the ultimate sweet spot for me to be feeling my best, performing at a really high level, recovering at a really high level, all while looking how I want to look as well. And I think staying a little bit leaner in the last couple of months has really helped with recovery, coming out of burnout that I faced earlier in this year, staying fresh throughout the weeks in recent months as well. So that's been a big part. And then I'd say the fourth one is potentially a bit deeper in that just learning more about myself and diving deeper into my own psyche and being comfortable in my own skin, and also just understanding that I'm not doing this anymore for ego-driven reasons. And what I mean by that is I feel like I squashed a lot of the ego-driven reasons I had for going at 120 miles an hour before, where I felt like I was trying to prove certain points to people, where I felt like I was trying to prove it to myself, that I could go 120 miles an hour, that I felt like I could. I think it was around like proving yourself. And I think a lot of high performers, a lot of people that struggle with this, they've got this innate ego-driven desire to want to prove to yourself or others that you can do it. And I realized that for a long time that was me. But back at the beginning, I was like, I can prove to my parents that, yeah, I can pay the bills. And then after that, it was proving to so-and-so that I can do this. And, just there's always something that I was trying to prove something towards. Whereas now I feel like I'm finally in the place where I'm just compelled to do what I'm doing for wider impact and purpose more than anything. And that shift has made me realize that if I'm not serving myself, I can't serve the purpose that I want to serve. Diving deeper into that and learning about myself and the ego and what really drives me from a deeper level, and I'm being uncomfortable, has really helped identify sort of signs of when I'm doing it for the right and wrong reasons. And the other thing actually is being comfortable in my own skin. I think another thing where I struggled a lot with was actually just being comfortable in my own skin. So what I'd do is, instead of, because I didn't want to be not busy, or because I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts, I just work and push even harder and harder, because it's just through suppression. I wanted to suppress things, so I just push harder with work and almost use it as a bit of a crutch. Whereas now that element has disappeared. I've cleared a lot of that in the last year, and that's made a massive difference, because it's pretty scary actually reflecting just how much I was using that as a catapult to push harder. So a couple of things there that they're worth exploring yourself. If you feel like if you relate to the question that was asked there, it's worth exploring the different elements that you might have been facing yourself, because yeah, it's pretty nuts when you dive into it and you actually dig deeper into what's going on, what's really happening below the surface, and it kind of links back to the biggest issue that we face is our mind and the relentless nature of it. So Yeah, good question. Second question, how to keep motivated when life throws you lemons. So I've never really followed or read motivational books or videos. I don't find myself getting anything from them. And if I ever see them or if they come up, I just pass. I find myself skipping them. I don't really follow motivational people or pages or quotes because I just found I just don't get much out of it. And I never really think about motivation, about being motivated. What I think about more is just trying to live in a way that aligns with what I like doing, what I want to do. And there's very few things in my life now that I feel like I have to do. And if I do get them, I just think about how can I link this to the bigger reason and the bigger cause. And that makes it a lot easier to sort out. Or I just decide whether it can be something that can be just asking if it's even necessary. But that's a journey I'm still on. But the concept around motivation just rarely comes up, and I find it very difficult sometimes to think about motivation when people say, like, how do I get motivated? How do I keep motivated? Because I think when you know a bigger reason behind what you're doing, when you know why you're doing something, and you have an important reason for it, it's meaningful. I think motivation just disappears and it becomes something different. I was chatting to a friend of mine about motivation, and he works in the corporate world, and he was saying a lot of people talk about the same sort of thing, and he can't get why people struggle with motivation, because it just feels he loves what he does, and his innate desire around his work is something more meaningful than himself, and he links it to the bigger company vision. And for him, that motivation aspect never really comes up. And then even in like fitness, I think if you consider some of the points I've discussed in this 3-part Q&A, you start to see how fitness, your work, your relationships, your purpose, your environment, your community, everything sort of links together. And when all things are firing in the right place, fitness doesn't become something you need to be motivated for. I think I've had a couple of moments. There's a couple of very clear moments in the past year, for example, where I've had really hard and dark moments. But I've never thought to myself, and this is specific to business, but I never thought to myself, oh, am I going to give up? Or do I need some motivation to push me through this? It never even crossed my mind. I never looked for motivation. I never thought I need to like watch the latest sort of hype up video. I just have this, what I tend to do instead is either go harder or just move on accordingly. And I think the journey that I've discussed recently is, instead of suppressing it, it's more processing it. And that's been the biggest game changer. I think a lot of it actually comes from training. Having trained for so many years, something we discuss as a team a lot is voluntary stress that we put on ourselves through hard training and entering the void. Whilst in the moment it can feel very difficult, what you're actually training yourself to do is to be able to continue to push when things are difficult. And that teaches you something about motivation that I think few things can teach you. So I think if you're struggling with motivation, you just haven't cracked what you really want in whatever you're trying to get motivated for. And if you ever find yourself needing to motivate yourself for something, question the intention behind what you're doing, and question whether it's actually what you want to do or whether you've linked it to your bigger purpose. That's the key. That's the answer for motivation. Next question. What do you give up on when you give up on you? What were you to lose? Sorry, what do you give up on when you give up on you? And this was a question asked by Manisha, and I asked back for clarity what the question was specifically asking. And it's around what would I lose if I were to treat myself badly? It kind of segues off the previous question. I don't think I can't remember a time when I've just said no, like I've given up on myself completely. I think I've always managed to keep some level of my 3S's in place, like structure, strategy, and systems around health and fitness. I don't think I can imagine life another way. And I think the reason why, I was thinking about this when I read the question, when I saw the question first, I was like, that's interesting, because it would almost sound robotic to say no. But then I thought, well, why is that? Why is the answer no to it? And I think it's because I was lucky to discover the holistic power of fitness at a young age. And because of that, it's always been my biggest lesson in anything and everything. And and more than anything, it's kept me very selfish in the right reasons to always prioritize myself first with nutrition, training, walking, good structure in the day. Pretty much for as long as I can remember it, since I started training at the age of 17, I always had this selfish streak, like a positive selfish streak around fitness, around nutrition, in that no matter who I was with, no matter where I was, I would always think, how can I put my fitness first? And this obviously came to a lot of resistance, a lot of social stigma, a lot of sort of comments. But to me, it was just like, it was so important. And I think because of that, and I did it at a young age, it instilled a behavior as I got older that even if things got tough, fitness would always be a high priority. And by default, myself, I wouldn't give up on myself, wouldn't give up on my own self-care physically. That being said, my biggest challenge has always been being kind to myself from a mental perspective. I think for years, I've worked for the worst boss in the world. I probably still am working for the worst boss in the world myself. That chatter of, you're not good enough, you need to prove yourself, you need to go harder. This has been a struggle of mine for years. And it's what's caused me, if we link it back to the burnout stuff, it's what's caused me to that. And it's caused me to push harder, go at 120 miles an hour with no real tangible improvement in whatever I'm trying to improve on. And that's when I look back, I'm thinking, that makes no sense, because, well, what it actually does, it proves that, the more input you put, it doesn't always increase the output. And I was assuming that more input would mean more output, but it just wasn't the case. So I don't know if that's necessarily giving up on myself, but it's more just treating myself really badly with the chatter. And that chatter's, this year I've managed to work through a lot of that chatter and where that came from and why it was there. I've spoken about parental expectations that I created in my own mind. I created these stories in my own mind that I needed to be a certain way. We talk about the immigrant mentality that my parents had, where it was about working non-stop just to create freedom for the next generation. But in that, the next generation, they saw that and took it upon themselves to carry on that same tradition and carry on that same work ethic. And then if you're not doing it, you start saying to yourself, you're not good enough, or you need to go harder, or you need to prove yourself that you can do it too. But letting go of that has been the biggest game changer for me. And letting go of that has allowed me to free myself from these expectations, these stories, these thoughts, and has taken away that worst boss in the world. Is still pretty bad, but it's not as bad as it was, say, 6, 12, 18 months ago. So this is probably less so giving up on myself and more just not being kind to myself and not realizing that doing that is actually only detriment to my wider purpose and my wider health versus anything else. It's not actually driving things forward. It's actually pulling me back in the wrong places. And if I fall into this trap in the past, it's usually when I sacrifice on sleep. I feel mentally terrible as a result. And one thing that's really helped is, and that's the next topic of the Q&A, is around meditation. And meditation has helped a lot with being kinder, with seeing the wood for the trees, seeing thoughts for what they are, and all the self-fabricated comments that we make to ourselves and we hurt ourselves with. And it's that's been the most difficult part in terms of that self-care talk, that treating myself badly. Giving up has never been an option, but treating myself kindly and in a good way has been the difficult part. But I think I'm as I reflected on in the first part, probably in the best place for that as of now. So it's been quite the journey, but it's been incredible. And kind of it was segue into question 4 here is, why are you meditating? How are you meditating? And how did you build the habit? And what are the benefits that you found? I started it when I took some time off earlier this year, when I went off the grid for 7 days, just read, reflect, journaled, I started going down a deeper spiritual and philosophical route. I started questioning different awareness levels, different consciousness levels, deeper questions in life. Also the big question of like, who am I on a deeper level, like beyond just Akash, like who is the witness, who is the observer, who's the watcher, really going down that sort of pathway. And that was like I was doing a lot of that I was doing a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, but I wasn't practicing any meditation. I wasn't practicing any sort of any sort of awareness or mindfulness around the questions I was asking. I was just sort of reading and thinking. And then I came across a really good book called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and he had a challenge inside there about 60 days of meditation for 60 minutes, and just doing it for meditation's sake and not making it a big strategic exercise. Because in the past, what I tried to do is I tried to gamify meditation. I tried to hack it. I tried to think of the best strategies around it, and in all that created paralysis by analysis, and I ended up doing nothing. What I liked about this approach was that it wasn't a strategic exercise. It wasn't anything special. All I literally did was shut my eyes for 60 minutes and just let whatever happen, and just take 60 minutes to let the mind wander. And the first time, it was very, very interesting in that it felt new, it felt novel. And then the next few days, it felt really difficult. Like it felt really, really difficult. Just trying to sit there and just let the mind wander. I think I realized just how distracted I am, and just how much the mind just bounces around all over the place. But at the same time, I also realized it's like how uncomfortable I am with that experience, and how uncomfortable I was with just being a part of that sort of chaos that's going on in my head. But as I got more and more into it, it started to feel more psychedelic. It started feeling incredibly deep. I felt like I was going through a journey. And now I've realized, having done over 60 days in a row, anywhere between 10 and 60 minutes. So I've not done 60 minutes every day. I've done anywhere between 10 and 60 minutes. I find that 10 minutes can ground you. Doing 10 minutes of meditation can ground you quite nicely. 20 minutes gives you a little bit of insight into what's going on. I think 30 minutes gives you extra depth, starts to quieten the mind. You start quietening that internal chatter. And then 40 minutes is when you really start diving deep. I think the hardest bit is the first few minutes, that initial time where you just shut your eyes, you start being more aware and more conscious of what's going on in your mind and your body and your awareness. And it's being able to resist it's being able to not resist what happens and just surrender to the moment and surrender to the chaos that's probably going on inside of you, especially the first few times you do this, and probably the first few weeks maybe. I say this from a little bit of reading that I've done on meditation since starting, there's so many ways to do it. The key really is, the consensus is just to pick what you like, just pick what works. And the one I've seemed to be doing, again, not out of choice, but having just read all the different types of meditation, I was like, oh yeah, that's probably what I'm doing now, is choiceless awareness and / insight meditation. So that's when you're literally just watching your mind. You're just being observant, you're being mindful, you're being aware of what's happening, you're just being an observer, you're being the witness, and you're understanding that you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions and all the stuff that's going on in your mind. You're not even your mind, you're separate from that, and you're the witness. And in this form of meditation, you literally just watch the mind. You'll have periods of nothing and bliss and no mind and the void. And then you'll have periods of random thought, random chatter. And the key really, as I've learned in the past couple of months, is to let it all happen and surrender to it all. Just literally just surrender to whatever's happening and just be an observer. And you'll start realizing a lot of the muck that bubbles up, and the ability to just let it be and watch it happen and let it unfold. The work that's really, so once you start meditation, you realize just how distracted you are. And you realize just how fleeting these periods of no mind actually are. That total presence, total bliss, total being with one. You realize just how infrequent they are, because you're constantly being bombarded with different thoughts and different stories that you're constantly creating in your head. Either you're regretting the past, or you're fantasizing or anxious about the future. You are doing one or the other, or we are doing one or the other. And you start realizing just how many, all your problems pretty much come from either you're regretting the past or you're fantasizing about the future. And what I found with meditation is I've started to learn that, I'm not my thoughts, yet we are constantly consumed by them. And once you get over the initial sort of couple of days where the muck is bubbling, you're finally away from distraction and overstimulation, and you can just see for what it is. That's when the benefits really start to show. But if I reflect back on why I think it's working for me, I think it's because I'm not trying to be over the top strategic about it in the sense of I've not got any objectives with it. I'm just being like, this is like 10 to 20, 30, 40 minutes of just me time, alone time, and just enjoying it. Like it's become quite fun now just to sit and experience that depth of the journey that goes within, and really looking within to then be at my best externally. I think it teaches multiple things. Firstly, it teaches you the mind is just nuts most of the time. It's literally just nuts. It teaches you the needlessness of external desires. It teaches you peace within. It teaches purpose internally and externally. It teaches you to be separate from your thoughts, to identify the thoughts as what they are. Like, one analogy I always think of is when I'm watching my thoughts, they're waiting in a room on the right behind a door, and then they'll open the door and I'll let them one in at a time. That's what I kind of think of when I'm meditating, and I let them one in at a time, but none of them can stay in that room. They've got to exit on the left. And the idea is that they're walking on the right and they have to exit on the left. The key being the fact they have to exit. They don't stay around. We don't latch onto them and think, all right, we're going to stay with you for the next 30, 40, 50 minutes or days or months or years. You're just going to enter where you enter and then leave. So it teaches you that separateness from the thoughts, and that these thoughts that come in, whether you use that analogy of the room, or you can just think of everything that's going on in your head as a space of consciousness. They appear and then they disappear at the end. And I think meditation teaches you to let them go away, to separate from the ones that we obsessed over. And I think that's where the real power of it has come, because you start cutting through the illusion of the big self that we create, the big ego that we attach ourselves towards. It helps cut through the illusion of all the fabrications that you've created, and this big sense of ego and self that we identify with. And it allows us to let go of that. So hopefully that's making some sense with what I'm talking about with regards to my meditation experience. It's not been a case of, like, for me, it's not been, let me just breathe for 10 minutes, which is what I think sometimes I think the mainstream has made it sound a bit like that, where you're just going to focus on your breath for 10 minutes. I think that's that is essentially a practice, but the reasons for it and the benefits and the exploration that you have with it goes a lot deeper than that. So yeah, that's a meditation. And from that, I'd say from it all, one of the biggest eye openers has been actually just catching myself when I'm lost in thought, and realizing that we actually spend most of our days just lost in thought. And it's only when you watch, like, children, you just see how pure and how much they can live in the moment. You know, I was at the Indian wedding last week, and the priest, it was at one point, it was just me, the priest, and my little nephew. And the priest says, he goes to me, look at him. He's got no concept. His mind isn't being constructed yet. He's got no concept of the past. He's got no concept of the future. He's just living moment to moment in the present, completely in the present. And he's at complete peace. And I thought, that's exactly it. Like, he's that child that essentially once they get to a point where you identify with yourself and you build your own ego, it all changes. But at that point, there's no past, there's no future. It's literally just presence. And the awareness of just knowing when you're lost in thought has been a real interesting experience. So how I do it, the precursor is literally a journal. Once I journal in my chair, I just do that for a couple of minutes, sit with my eyes shut for anywhere between 5 and 60 minutes. So if I've got a lot going on in a day, I'll do 5-10 minutes. And if I've got more time, typically on the weekends, I'll go longer. And yeah, the overall, the benefits have been pretty massive. And I think it's going to stay part of a regular self-care routine for myself. There's nothing special around it. You don't need to do it in a special room. You don't need to do it in a special environment or it doesn't need to be what sometimes the perception is. It can be as simple as literally just sitting down, closing your eyes, and just being alone with your thoughts. It's one of the most scary things for most of us to go through. I find it extremely difficult, and I love it. And I think it's probably one of the best things we can do for our minds, our bodies, our health, our fitness, because you can start resolving, processing, and auditing a lot of the muck that we suppress and don't let come up because we never actually spend some time alone. Meditation, when you're meditating, you're alone, you're not stimulated, you're not distracted by thoughts. It's just you and what's going on inside, and you can finally take that suppression off and let what comes up comes up. So if you're thinking about trying it, just give it a go. Try tomorrow morning, set a timer for 60 minutes, no agenda, literally just sit in your chair, close your eyes, set a timer for 60 minutes, see what happens. If you give it a go, do drop me a note, drop me a DM on social media, or email me at akash.vaghela@rntfitness.com, and I'd love to hear your own experiences of meditation, or anything I've discussed over the last couple of episodes. It's been interesting getting these questions in, and it's been a bit of a journalistic experience for myself. So thank you for all the questions, And it's very much appreciated. Appreciate the follow, the listening, if you've come this far, and I look forward to sharing more of the journey. Thank you so much for being here today on this episode of R&T Fitness Radio. I'd love for you to do a quick little favor for us. Please head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, leave a comment, and share it with your family and friends. If you're interested in learning more about how to transform your body and positively change your life, go to www.rntfitness.com and explore all our free content on offer. Thank you.